I have no idea what's going on, but apparently right now I can't live stream. I don't know. It must be something to do with my encoder, but I'll just do it by a hangout tonight, and I'll have to deal with it. I had so many things set up. I had video set up, all kind of shit ready to go, and then when I tried to go live, nothing happened. Same thing. I use OBS encoder just like usual. Same thing. I did exactly the same thing as I usually do. Can't go live. I checked my account status. My account status is fine. I got no strikes. I got live streams enabled. I have no idea what's going on. Anyway, Handsome Truth is going on after this, or maybe even might overlap a little bit. So I want to try to get this on the ball. It's just going to be me reading to you. And I don't see any way I could bring up other. Do you guys know any ways I could bring up different screens on a Hangout? Because I know how to do it on a live stream, but not on a Hangout. Thanks. Can you guys hear me okay, too? Matthew Perry? No, I'm from New Jersey, so that's the rough accent you hear. Let it be no let it be no impression on the IQ though. Goku, no, I didn't get showed. I checked my account status. Everything's fine. You guys, how's my my volume's good? I take it. Okay, thank you. Man, I wanted to do this the other way, but I'll have to probably try a new encoder. Something's going on with OBS. I don't know. Yeah, definitely South Jersey, Perry. What's up, guys? I'm going to have to get started. I can't wait for people to roll in because Handsome Truth is on after me, and I don't want to go long. So, is there any way I can show another window? View. No. Window. What's an extension? All right, you guys remember the ADL stuff? When I was reading the book, The ADL, The Ugly Truth About the ADL, they talked about Meyer Lansky and the connection with the mob. Now I'm reading this book, Red Mafia, and it's all about Russian Jews coming to the United States. This ties into Trumpgate. So there's this guy, E. Michael Jones, you guys might know about him, right? I hear you, Matthew. There's this guy, E. Michael Jones, and he ties all this shit together. It's amazing to hear him at least mention what we're talking about. And so I had that all set up, ready to go. We'll have to do it another stream. I'm gonna jump right into the text. Chapter 3, Brighton Beach, Goodfellas. Brighton Beach is where all these Russian Jews immigrated from Russia and immigrated to Brighton Beach, New Jersey, or Brighton Beach is that actually New York or is it Jersey? I think it's Jersey. Yeah, it's Jersey. All right, Brighton Beach, Goodfellas. A few days after Agran was found in a pool of his own blood, his driver, Boris Neifeld, strolled into what had been Agran's modest office at the El Caribe Country Club in Brighton Beach. He was there to begin his new job as the driver and bodyguard of the man who benefited the most from the execution of Evse Agran, Marat Balugala, the new godfather of the Russian mob. So when you hear Russian mob, this was written by a Jew, mind you. When you hear Russian mob, think Jewish mob. When you hear Russian gangster, think Jewish gangster. All right? Virtually everyone in law enforcement who's had anything to do with investigating the Russian mob believes Belugula ordered the hit, but he has always denied it. Quote, Evsey used to come to the Odessa restaurant and pick fights, Belugula claims. Sometimes 10 or 20 people would get into a brawl. Maybe Evsa was killed by someone he fought with before. Belugula had been serving as Agran's consigliere for several years. See, I can't go to my dictionary to look up consigliere, but he's the guy, he would be like an advisor, a guy who works for him. I'd like to look that up too. Well, what the fuck? I'm going to look it up anyway, even though you guys can't see it. Consigliere is an advisor, especially to a crime boss. All right, there you go. You got it from Tu Il Shmeal, right from the horse's mouth. Belugula had been serving as Agran's consigliere for several years, and while he was always careful to pay Agran the respect due to a great man, he had his own ideas. All along, he had been forging a rival criminal syndicate of his own. And as Belugula's star began to rise, explains a former insider, Agran, quote, wanted a piece of the action. Because of his status, Agran expected something, unquote. What Agran got, of course, was 2 bullets in the head. Within a few months of seizing power, Belugula demonstrated that he was the very model of a modern Don. Unlike Agran, who had been a thuggish neighborhood extortionist, Belugula was a brilliant, coldly efficient crime boss who was soon not only conspicuously enjoying the luscious version of the American dream, but bestowing his largesse on members of the small Russian emigre community. Largesse. These are gifts of money, I think, and privilege. Largesse. Largesse. Generosity in bestowing money or gifts upon others. So that last sentence was Belugula was a brilliant, coldly efficient crime boss who was soon not only conspicuously enjoying the luscious version of the American dream, but bestowing his largesse on members of the small Russian emigre community. Quote, Margat was the king of Brighton Beach, unquote. This is the new guy, the new boss, Margat Belugula, recalled a former employee. He had a Robin Hood complex. People would come over from Russia and he'd give them jobs. He liked professional men. Guys came over and couldn't practice medicine or use their engineering degrees. He sought them out. He was fascinated with intellectuals. He co-opted them. He put them into the gasoline business. He put them into car washes or taxi companies. He'd reinvest his own money in their business if they were having trouble. He had a heart. Wasn't that nice? Such generosity was, of course, also good for building loyalty. It seemed that everyone in Brighton Beach owed him a favor, and he wasn't hesitant about collecting on them. So you see, was he really just this generous guy? Ah, don't worry, no strings attached? No, there's strings. There are always strings. My stepfather growing up, he wasn't involved in the mob, the Italian version. But he knew a lot of people like that. This guy, my stepfather was an Atlantic City cop for 25 years, but he was from South Philly. His father was a judge in Philadelphia. And he always told me, he said, Shmeal, whenever you see these mafiosi type, don't ever accept a favor and don't ever do a favor. Just mind your business, respectfully decline. And that way you never get caught up in it. Because as soon as you do a favor, you're going to be expected to do more favors. As soon as you accept a favor, you owe. Don't ever do it. So this guy had everybody owing him a favor. Through Brighton Beach, residents had good reason to be Though Brighton Beach residents had good reason to be tight-lipped about Beluga, tales of his enormous wealth began circulating in cafes and over dinner tables. He tried to purchase an island off the coast of South Africa to set up a bank for money laundering. He circled Manhattan on luxury yachts, holding all-night drug and sex orgies, but he didn't invite Shmeal. He rode in a custom stretch limo, white and immaculate, with a black liveried chauffeur. Liveried. Livery is driving for someone. Liveried. It was a white immaculate limousine with a black liveried chauffeur and stocked with ice cold bottles of vodka. Marat throws around diamonds the way we throw around dollar bills. Joe Galizia, a soldier in the Genovese family, enviously told an associate in a conversation taped by police. Oh, hate when that happens. Quote, everybody in Brighton Beach talked about Beluga in hushed tones, unquote, says Ray Germain, a former chief of the Rackets Bureau for the Suffolk County DA in New York. Quote, these people, these these were people who knew him from the old country. They were really, genuinely scared of this guy, unquote. Margat Balugala was born in 1943 in Orenburg, a small Russian town at the height of World War II. His mother, Zinaida, fled with the children from their home in Odessa as the German Wehrmacht swept across the Russian steppes. That's the German army. Margat's father, Jakov, was a lieutenant in the Red Army. Beluga claims that he was one of the armored corps that stormed Berlin during the last desperate hours of the war. Believe me, by the time they got to Berlin, that was mop-up duty. Berlin was being defended by old men and women and children by that point. In the harshness of the Stalin era, the Belugas led a comfortable, middle-class life. Jakov worked in a factory manufacturing locks. Not Jewish locks, like as in bagels, but locks. As did his wife. So his wife worked there too. Young Marat, an average high school student, was drafted into the Soviet army at the age of 19 and served as a bursar for 3 years, after which the party assigned him to manage a small food co-op in Odessa. So what's a bursar? I gotta look it up. Bursar. A person who manages the financial affairs of a college or university. Okay. Determined to get ahead, Marat attended night school, receiving a diploma as a teacher of mathematics and then a business degree in economics and mathematics. Like many ambitious Russians with a capitalist predilection, he promptly plunged into the country's flourishing black market. He quietly learned to attend to the demanding appetites of the apparatchiks, these are government people, making certain that the choicest meats and produce was diverted to them. He was only 22 years old when he was rewarded with a prestigious job as a bursar on the Ivan Franko, a Soviet cruise ship that catered to foreign tourists. According to American law, enforcement sources, and Brighton Beach colleagues, party bosses slipped Beluga currency, gold, valuable Russian artifacts, and stolen artworks to sell to the tourists or to fence in Europe. It was a good job, Beluga recalls. I got good money. My salary was in dollars and rubles. I traveled to Australia, France, England, and Italy. The KGB gave me visas, no problem. I brought back lots of stuff, stereos, cameras. I was not middle class, I was upper middle class. I had a nice apartment in Odessa, a dacha on the Black Sea. What's a dacha? Isn't that a Mrs.? DACH. No, it's a house, a country house, or cottage in Russia. He met his wife, Alexandra, at a friend's wedding party in 1965 and married her the following year. Because she didn't like his traveling, in 1971, after 5 years at sea, he got himself appointed manager of the largest food co op in the Ukraine, a huge promotion that allowed him to rise to even greater heights as a black marketeer. On his 30th birthday, the flourishing Belugula threw himself a gala party at his dacha, his country house, in the sunny Crimea. Many of his region's elite were in attendance, including Mikhail Gorbachev, then a young regional party boss who posed for a photo with Marat and his wife. Belugula later bragged to his Brighton Beach mob associates that Gorbachev was on his pad, a claim that seems doubtful. On his pad, that means on his money list. A claim that seems doubtful. Even then, Gorbachev was a stern reformer. It would have been impossible, however, for a Soviet party boss to avoid dealing with black marketeers in some way, since they played such an integral role in the economic life of the country. So whether or not Mikhail Gorbachev owed him money, the chances are he probably did deal with Mikhail Gorbachev when he was just a party boss, long before they propped him up as leader of the Soviet Union. The fact that Belugula was Jewish apparently never hindered his career, even though government-sponsored anti-Semitism surged after Israel's victory over 5 Arab armies in the June 1967 Six-Day War. I never felt anti-Semitism, Belugula says, although he admits he was only nominally a Jew. He never attended Odessa's lone synagogue and was ignorant of Jewish history and religion. Jews had some of the best positions in the country. They were the big artists, musicians. They had the big money. The big money. So you see, most of these guys turned out to be only nominally Jewish. They didn't identify so much with their Judaism. This is a different breed of Jew. This is a Russian Jew. When he decided to journey to America, therefore, it was not because he suffered as a Jew, though he concedes, I used that as an excuse when I applied for my visa. Although he was leading the charmed life of a high-flying black marketeer, he decided to leave it behind when I saw with my own eyes how people lived in the West, says Belugula. They pushed me to move. A business associate explains, Marat said he read about a lot about capitalism and he knew he could do very well over there. On January 13th, 1977, Belugula, his wife, and their 2 young daughters, together with his elderly parents and young brother Leon, moved to Washington Heights in Upper Manhattan, where a small enclave of German Jews who had fled from Hitler lived precariously among drug dealers and boombox din. Boombox din means noise, and we know what boombox din means. It means black people. Who had the boomboxes back in the day? You remember History of the World Part 1, where it's all in ancient Rome and then a black guy comes by with a boombox? Some good Mel Brooks shit. So this guy lived around the German Jews that fled from Hitler who were living precariously among drug dealers and boombox noise. Belugula attended English classes arranged by a Manhattan-based organization that settles Soviet Jews, which then found him a job in the garment district. He worked for 6 months as a textile cutter for $3.50 an hour, claims Alexandra, his wife. It was hard for us, with no language, no money, she says. Belugula's fortunes improved markedly when he relocated his family to Brighton Beach. And he started to work for the infamous Vor Avse Agran. We looked up Vor before, and I think it means just like one of the Russian boys. Let's look it up again. Well, it's not in the normal dictionary. Let's look it up here. Russian Vor. Ah, a Vor is a made man in the Russian mafia. So now, even if I don't finish this today, I want to play for you guys something. Brighton Beach, right? We got Brighton Beach. We've got the Russian mafia who are really Jews. And we have the Donald Trump thing about, is Donald Trump in Putin's hands and all that shit. I'm going to play for you E. Michael Jones talking on Peter Halan's show. Can I post? I want to be able to post something here. I'm going to give you guys a link to the video. This is the video I'm talking about. E. Michael Jones, okay? At minute 16:42, here's what he's saying.
So where are you going to get $100 million? Well, you said there was hardly any millionaires in Russia up till... Well, how could there be? It's a communist country. Right.
Okay, right now he's talking about the fact that when Soviet Union ended and communism ended, it went from state-owned to private-owned. All the gas companies and all these things, they were sold off, and it was a shady deal. They were sold off to shady people with big money who were able to buy up the entire Soviet Union. And so there was a select group of Russian billionaires who overwhelmingly, I think 7 out of 8 of the Russian oligarchs were Jewish. And so he talks about, E. Michael Jones talks about how these Russian Jews bought up all of Russia, and how when the media talks about Russian Gate with Trump, what they really mean is Jewish Gate, but they don't have the balls to say it. And it connects to the ADL and Meyer Lansky too. Check it out.
So technically, how can you be a millionaire in a communist country?
Nobody had money.
They didn't own anything. The state owned all of the assets, all the income-producing assets in the Soviet Union. So how can you have a millionaire? Where are you going to get the money? Well, the answer is Jeffrey Sachs. Jeffrey Sachs is the go-between between the people, the Russians you need in order to buy up everything in Russia at fire sale prices, and the people who have the money, namely Wall Street. Okay? So the Wall Street money, Sachs is the middleman. The Wall Street money starts going in, and suddenly you have these oligarchs, and they are Russian. Now, at a certain point, suddenly you realize, wait a minute, there's something more going on here. Okay? And this is the point, this is where we're saying here that these Russians, they came over here with suitcases full of money, getting from the oligarchs. The money is just gushing in. They have to get the money out. They need a money laundering operation. And Trump is there and helps them launder the money.
Tony, this is E. Michael Jones. I'm just playing a video of E. Michael Jones talking about the Russian oligarchs coming over. Not the oligarchs, but the Russian mafia, which was overwhelmingly Jewish, coming to the United States. And where does this book say they settled? Brighton Beach. He's going to mention Brighton Beach, and he ties this all in a perfect little bow for you. Whatever you think about E. Michael Jones, this motherfucker knows his shit. Like, I'm not down with his religious stuff. I'm not down with maybe 10, 20% of what he says. But this guy, I'm a non-believer. I don't really believe in God. I define God as the universe. But had I been too stubborn to not listen to him, I'd be missing out on a wealth of knowledge. This guy is fucking good. He is smart.
They buy the casinos. It's okay. This is all part of a political operation, however, that started 20 years earlier when the Jackson-Vanik Amendment was passed by the Senate.
1972?
74, something like that. Anyway, all of these so-called Russian oligarchs, they all end up over in Brighton Beach.
There you
and
go.
At this point, we start to realize.
There you go. Brighton Beach. What are we reading? We're reading about a book talking about all the Russians going to Brighton Beach. This shit, when I saw this video, it tied it all together for me like you wouldn't believe. So, what else did I want to mention? I think that amendment he's talking about was the thing we read about in the Ugly Truth about the ADL. See, I'm testing you guys to see if you really were listening. When the United States did this Food for Jews program, and the ADL was trying to get a bunch of Jews to go to Israel, but most of the Jews didn't want to go to Israel. They said, fuck you, we're going to Western Europe and we're going to the United States. There you go. So some Jews in the United States were trying to get them over to the United States, and there were other groups of Jews trying to get them to Israel. Jews don't always agree about everything, and as a matter of fact, there's a lot of argument going on in between the different various groups of Jews. We're learning. We have a lot to go. We have years of reading to go ahead of us. I'm not even exaggerating. All right, let's listen up.
They're not Russians. They're Jews.
I'm going to go back.
Casinos, it's okay. This is all part of a political operation, however, that started 20 years earlier when the Jackson-Vanik Amendment was passed by the Senate.
1972?
74, something like that. Anyway, all of these so-called Russian oligarchs, they all end up over in Brighton Beach. And at this point, we start to realize they're not Russians. They're Jews.
There you go. There you go. And where are they going? Brighton Beach. And what are we reading? He's going to mention this book, too. Hang in there. Listen.
This is the whole point here. Suddenly, if you take your find and replace function on your word processor, and you type in Russian and say replace with Jews, suddenly you have a completely plausible book.
So this guy is speaking about a book that was written about the Trump thing, which he says is distraction. It's not really telling the whole truth. It's talking about Russiagate, but it's not identifying the Russian mafia as what they are. They are Jews. And so he actually mentions the book. Let's listen. I'll let it run.
This book would be
It's completely plausible, and Unger has to admit the fact, even in his own book, that the entire so-called Russian mafia is Jewish, because his book is based on Robert Friedman's book, Red Mafia.
Thank you, Robert Friedman, Red Mafia. What does it say there in the title? We're reading Red Mafia. Okay, so I just wanted to point it out to you guys. This book is important. It's really, and I didn't know it when I first started reading it on YouTube, but I'm learning. Just like you guys are learning, I'm learning too. I'm not some know-it-all that come here. I'm gonna educate the masses. You guys are watching me educate myself, and you're a part of it. And I'm glad to have you guys.
Which he says the same thing. So not only are we talking about the Jews here, you can't understand what's going on here unless you talk about the Jews. Okay, because first of all, Jeffrey Sachs and the Harvard operation is all Jews. Okay? Secondly, the people that they're getting it from Wall Street, Goldman Sachs, people like that, the source of the capital, they're Jews. And it turns out 7 of the 8 oligarchs in Russia are Jews as well.
7 of the 8 oligarchs are Jews in Russia. So they talk about the Russian mafia and the Russian oligarchs. Guys, remember I said it while we were reading the book, if you take out Russian and put in Jew, he's perfect. He's absolutely correct. You get a better idea. And so keep all this stuff in mind when you hear in the news Russia with Israel and the dealings going on. There's something above what the media is telling you. Obviously, they lied to us constantly. But when Russia deals with Israel, there's a different dynamic going on that most people realize.
So suddenly you realize this is a Jewish operation. It's not a Russian operation. It's a Jewish operation. So why don't we have a Jewish gate investigation? Well, wait a minute. We don't need that because that's so obvious. If there's one group in this country that interferes in every national election, it's the Jews.
Well, ask Cynthia McKinney.
Ask Cynthia McKinney.
Cynthia McKinney, were you guys here when I played Cynthia McKinney? She became a congresswoman. She was elected by an overwhelmingly black area, which she represented. She wanted to better the condition of her people. When she got to Congress, she was told to sign these agreements that she pledges herself to Israel. AIPAC. These are the people. You want to talk about Russians meddling in our elections? It's Israel. It's Russian Jews that are meddling in our elections all the time. And all this shit about Russia meddling in our shit is a diversion from the truth. It's partly true, but it's not the whole truth, you see. That's why when you go to court, they ask you to swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. We're learning.
Okay, that's the story of she was elected by the black people in, was it Georgia? Georgia. She got in, she told the story, so I think it's on the internet. She walks into her office, and before she even sits down in her chair, the fax machine churns out a piece of paper. It's a statement from AIPAC. This is the pledge that you have to sign because you are a congressman of the United States of America. You have to have 100% loyalty to AIPAC. Please.
Do you guys remember when Elizabeth McKinney was saying that you have to sign the pledge? And she refused to sign the pledge. And all money was taken from her. They were promising her all these promotions and they were going to do fundraisers and all this shit. And when she said, and when it got close to the fundraiser, they said, they called her up there like, did you sign the pledge yet? And she's like, I'm not signing the pledge. I'm not pledging my allegiance to Israel. I'm pledging my allegiance to the black people who fucking elected me in my state. You can go fuck yourself. And they pulled all the money, all the fundraisers dissolved in front of her eyes. And she was run right out of Congress. All the money went to her opponent in the next election. And she was out of there. So if you see a congressperson who's been there for 20, 30 years, you know they signed the pledge. You know they're a sellout. And you know goddamn well they are controlled by these very people, AIPAC. Now, when he says AIPAC, it's a different pronunciation. It's AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee. All right, let's continue.
Please sign this. And she refused to sign, and she was out of office like that.
Well, she also challenged 9/11, I think, too.
There's whatever. But I mean, she told that story about the facts coming from AIPAC. Yeah. So wait a minute. Now let's take a step back here. What are we saying here? Are we saying that Jews interfere in our electoral process? Well, of course they do. That's what AIPAC is. The American Israel Political Action Committee, or whatever it's called. Basically, every year they get involved and they interfere. And this election, the 2016 election, was an especially egregious example of this. Because not only was AIPAC doing the full court press, but my favorite high school buddy from Philadelphia, Benjamin Netanyahu, shows up and addresses the Congress. And basically, without the permission of President Obama, he doesn't need the president's permission. He's more powerful than the president.
Do you guys remember when Benjamin Netanyahu came here under Obama's presidency and he spoke to the Congress and they gave him 29 fucking standing ovations? You know who else that happened to? I've read a little bit of Solzhenitsyn. I read about half of the Gulag Archipelago. And they talked about this one time when Stalin was giving a speech. And he said this one thing. Everybody rose and applauded. Everybody's applauding. Yeah, Stalin. But everybody was afraid to stop applauding. Because if you were the first to stop applauding, well, maybe you were against Stalin. And maybe you were a danger to the government. And so everybody kept applauding. It was like 20 minutes, a half an hour, until finally someone took the initiative to stop applauding and everybody else stopped. And I think that guy was killed. This is something like what went on when Netanyahu came and spoke in front of our Congress. Everybody had to give him, applause after applause. Why? Why? Well, all our Congress people have signed the pledge. They are sold out. All our Congress people, they're sold out. Israel has bought and paid for our representatives. We are not being represented. Israel is. And the interests of American Jews, not us. And you have AIPAC and the ADL and this Russian mafia behind it. So let's continue on, people. If this doesn't fucking piss you off, nothing will. Then you have no fucking pulse, or you just don't understand yet. And if that's the case, I'm going to get you to understand. Hang with me, stay with me, and we're going to fucking learn.
He's got the entire Congress, and they allow him to come and speak, and he campaigns for Donald Trump. Well, is this influencing the election or what?
Mm-hmm.
You know, he does this. And on top of that, what we have is this disgusting spectacle time and time again.
Tony Barbara says traitors, a lot of them. 100% correct. Traitors, all traitors. Although, to be a traitor, you would have to have once been part of the crew, right? You must have been a patriot at one time and then turned. That's what a traitor is. These motherfuckers are worse than traitors. They never even were patriots to begin with. But yes, you're absolutely correct. Edgar Sanchez, how you doing? Marge, what's up? Elizabeth McKinney, I love Elizabeth McKinney. I have my problems with black people, and I've spoken about it before. But Elizabeth McKinney, she gets all of my respect. She cannot get enough praise. Cynthia was shilling with a CIA guy for 2 years. I'm not aware of that, Blitz. Put me hip to it so I can know. Thank you. Marge, who is this speaking? It's E. Michael Jones, and he's speaking on Peter Halan's channel. And here's a link to the video we're watching. Right now, we are at the 21-minute, 47-second mark. Now, let's continue. There's only a little bit left to go, and we'll get back to reading what we can. But, guys, don't forget, Handsome Truth is coming on in about half an hour, 45. So let's barrel through this and see what we can get done. We'll finish the rest another time if we have to.
Every time Netanyahu shows up, he's got to be perceived as the greatest orator since Demosthenes. He is the greatest orator the world has ever seen. And the proof of it is these lackeys, these bootlicking congressmen.
They clapped.
They gave him 27, or was it 27 or 29?
29.
29 standing ovations because of his eloquence. No, it's not because of his eloquence. It's because IPAC representatives are in the chamber, they're in the room, and they're making sure that every single congressman stands up, because if you don't, we're not getting any money.
How's that different than when they stood up for Stalin? Remember the story on that?
Yeah.
Did you guys? How's that different from when they stood up for Stalin? It's great. This video was so great for me because I had already read about the Stalin thing before I watched the video. I'm already reading, although I'm not done, with Red Mafia. And I already knew about a lot of the connections that he's tying them all together for me, and it blew my mind. It just blew my mind. You guys will see my comment in there when you go to the video. But guys, woo, I know it's deep. Two Heels, what up? You're going in the shower with me, man. Oh, man. Come on now. Hey, whatever you got to do. Whatever you got to do. I'm glad to be there because that means we're still learning. All right, guys, here we go.
It's no different. And so this is the situation. So at this point, once Unger admits this fact, the whole story collapses. Of course it's true. Of course the Israelis and the Israel lobby and the American Jews interfere in every election. Of course they...
Every election, AIPAC is interfering. Just wanted to comment. Edgar Sanchez and Marge Talica. HT is going on at 6. Yes, 6 Pacific time, 9 Eastern time. But I called him and he agreed to put it back about a half an hour so that I can get my stream in. So we have at least a half an hour, okay, guys? And I'm not going to go past 9:30 because I want to respect and let him do his thing. I don't want to miss his stream and I don't want to step on his toes. All right, let's hear.
They do. They control the American Congress. Of course they do. Why don't we have a Jew-gate investigation instead of a Russia-gate investigation? Well, the answer is in these books as well, because Robert Friedman was talking about Brighton Beach. Brighton Beach is the center of Jewish criminality in the United States. It's called Russian criminality, but it's Jewish, and they all know it. And so every time either the FBI or the New York Police Department tries to go after some type of criminal in Brighton Beach, the ADL is on their case immediately and calling them anti-Semitic.
Does that tie it all together or what? So we're reading about Brighton Beach and the Red Mafia. He says this is the center of Jewish power in the United States, and that if the FBI or any government entity goes after them, then the ADL comes in and starts fucking calling them anti-Semites and putting it in the media that they're anti-Semites and this is a wrongful persecution and, oh, we're victims, victims, victims. What is the book we just read? What is the book we just read? The Ugly Truth About the ADL. So it's ironic, or that's not ironic, it's coincidental that these two books that I've read back to back are coming together in such a form that E. Michael Jones, this guy, he's fucking brilliant. I don't care what he looks like. I don't care what he talks like. I don't care this greasy hair that's unkempt. I don't fucking care. He is an intellectual, bar none.
Right. This is going to cause a wave of anti-Semitism. The next thing you know, they're going to be rounding up Jews and putting them in ovens.
That's what the ADL would say. Oh, this is going to, if the FBI investigates into Brighton Beach, oh, we're going to end up being put in ovens again. Oh, there's going to be another Holocaust. All this bullshit. So I'm going to go back in the video just a sentence or two to let you hear that again, because this is the most important part.
Robert Friedman was talking about Brighton Beach. Brighton Beach is the center of Jewish criminality in the United States. It's called Russian criminality, but it's Jewish, and they all know it. And so every time either the FBI or the New York Police Department tries to go after some type of criminal in Brighton Beach, the ADL is on their case immediately and calling them anti-Semitic. Right. This is going to cause a wave of anti-Semitism. The next thing you know, they're going to be rounding up Jews and putting them in ovens because the cops cannot go after this criminal conspiracy.
But you pointed out that they purposely even sent over, they opened up their prisons to send some of those people.
Yeah, that was part of the whole thing. Sure.
So they were totally criminals.
So what are we talking about? We're talking about gangsters in Red Mafia. And yes, Blitz, it's Red Mafia, except it's spelled just a little different, F-I-Y-A, the Russian version. But yes, they opened up their prisons during this. ADL arranged something called the Food for Jews program, and they sent their Jews over to the United States, but they gave us the worst of the worst, all the criminals. They were supposed to go, the ADL thought they were going to Israel, but these guys, once they got to Western Europe, they had a mind of their own, and they decided to come to the United States, which is virgin territory for them to run their fucking game. And we hear it. Isn't that amazing? Now, I believe in a little while he mentions who's the gangster? Meyer Lansky. And remember we were talking about Myra Boland Lansky, the niece of Meyer Lansky. Listen.
They were by definition criminals, a lot of these people, whether they were Jews or not, that's a question. I don't know. If they stamp your passport and say you're a Jew, you're a Jew. Okay, but they did open up their jails. So Brighton Beach immediately became a center of criminal activity, which cannot be touched because every time the police try to do something, the ADL calls them an anti-Semitic for going after criminals.
And guys, who fucking polices the YouTube? Who polices YouTube? Who decides what is hate speech? Who decides what we can and can't say on YouTube? It's the ADL and the SPCL, the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is just basically another offshoot, another tentacle of the octopus. Listen up, guys.
This could lead, whatever you do, could lead to anti-Semitism.
Well, look, as I said, I think we covered this before, but I mean, this is nothing new for the ADL. The ADL has been a money laundering operation from the beginning. Okay, we're talking about when we go back to the 50s, the 60s. We're talking about Meyer Lansky. Meyer Lansky's granddaughter, by the way, works for the ADL.
Okay, it wasn't his niece; it was his granddaughter. Meyer Lansky's granddaughter works for the ADL. Do you remember in the ADL book there was a guy named Mo Dalitz? I think it's Dalitz. And he got this award, this prestigious award from the ADL called the Torches of Freedom Award or something like that. Do you remember? Because his name was being thrown through the mud, and he wanted to clean up his act, and so the ADL gives him this prestigious award. And now he's not Mo Dalitz, the gangster, murderer, thief. Now he's Mo Dalitz, the Torch of Freedom Award winner, right? And we also read, if you guys were there the night that we read about the Jewish control over the rap industry, do you remember when we read about the people that own Seagrams? Yeah. It goes deep, people.
To show you how close the connection here is, okay? Meyer Lansky and the ADL are sending money. They're sending money, gambling money. At a certain point, it was illegal gambling money to the ADL. And the ADL reciprocates by giving
one of their top awards.
Giving Mo Dalitz of Las Vegas their Torch of Freedom Award in 1984.
Best citizen.
So now, okay, there's no mystery here. Now we know what the story is. Nobody in Germany knew this. Nobody knows this.
All right, so that's good enough. And I've got about a half an hour to read what I can. And then, guys, I hope you guys go over to Handsome Truth as usual. So let's see what we can finish here in this this chapter. Maybe we'll finish the whole chapter if I go hard on it. All right. Belugula's. Now we're talking about this guy, Marak Belugula. Is it Marak? I believe so. Belugula. I'm reading this for the first time myself, so it's not like I know any of this. This is all new to me. You guys are experiencing it with me. We're learning together. That's what's cool about this stream, is that it's not like I have this thing all together and I'm presenting it to you. We are learning here together, and that's what's so cool. Belugula's fortunes improved markedly when he relocated his family to Brighton Beach, and he started to work for the infamous Vor, which is a made man in the Russian mafia, Jewish mafia. Evsey Agran, that's the guy that took 2 bullets to the head. Everybody knew his name, Alexandra cheerfully recalled. He was so much in the Russian newspapers. Agran, it turned out, was no match for the ambitious Belugula. While Agran's technical expertise didn't go beyond sadistic new uses for his electric cattle prod, Belugula wanted to lead the Organizatsiya into the upscale world of white-collar crime. And with the experience he had gained in the Soviet Union, he developed a business acumen that put him in a class by himself. Acumen is an expertise. Okay, so the Organizatsiya is the Russian mafia, the Jewish mafia. Again, when you hear Russian, just substitute the word Jewish because it's interchangeable at this point. Surrounded by a cadre, that means a group of Russian economic. I sound like Jan Irvin now. Economists. Surrounded by a cadre. By the way, I don't mean to slight Jan Irvin. I've been subscribed to that guy for 10 years, and I suggest you go subscribe too. I like Jan. He's a great guy, and he's got some crazy shit that'll blow your mind on his website and on his YouTube channel. So I don't mean to bust on Jan Irvin, but he does have some strange pronunciations. I think it's that Norwegian thing. Surrounded by a cadre of Russian economists and math prodigies at the Odessa restaurant, he acquired a knowledge of global markets that enabled him to make millions in the arcane world of commodities trading. He also energetically cultivated the Italian mobsters he met as a Grans Consigliere. After Agran was executed, Belugula organized his followers into a hierarchy, much like the Italian mafia, and before long, he succeeded in transforming the Organizia into a multi-billion-dollar-a-year criminal enterprise that stretched across the tatters of communist Eastern Europe, Africa, and Southeast Asia. Ultimately, however, it was Belugula's spectacular success in the gasoline bootlegging business, a scheme that would reportedly earn him hundreds of millions of dollars and an honored position with the Italian mafia, that would usher in the first golden age of Russian organized crime in America. Again, you hear Russian, substitute Jewish, because they are interchangeable. Belugula's bootlegging career began modestly enough. Within just a year after arriving in New York, he managed to gain control over 14 gas stations. He then formed 2 fuel dealerships and bought gas from a corporation owned by the Neifeld brothers. These are other Russian people. Again, substitute Jewish for Russian. This transaction was the foundation for an ingenious way to avoid paying billions of dollars of gasoline taxes. Guys, if you think you're going to raise taxes on the rich don't pay taxes. It doesn't matter how high you raise them. They have trusts, and they have an army of accountants, and they have loopholes. The rich do not pay taxes no matter how high you put the tax. You're just tightening the noose on yourself. Believe me. I sound a lot like Trump, right? Believe me. Believe me. Belugula's bootlegging career began modestly enough. Within just a year after arriving in New York, he managed to gain control over 14 gas stations. He then formed 2 fuel dealerships and bought gas from a corporation owned by the Neifeld brothers. This transaction was the foundation for an ingenious way to avoid paying billions of dollars in gasoline taxes. Gasoline bootleggers, mostly Turkish and Greek immigrants, had been operating in New York since the early 1960s. Guys, why isn't it Americans running our own fucking infrastructure, our own corporations? Why is it these outsiders? Think. They simply collected taxes at the pump, and instead of turning the money over to the government, pocketed the cash and disappeared before the IRS came and caught on. Quote, they'd make their $600,000 and go back to buy an island, and you'd never hear from them again, unquote, says Sam Racer, a Russian-born attorney who has represented Belugula. It was a nice scam until it got into the hands of the Russians. They bought Rolls-Royces and Ferraris and walked around Atlantic City, my hometown, with stacks of $100 bills, and suddenly the IRS realized they were getting fucked for hundreds of millions of dollars. Don't forget, the IRS is another fucking gangster clique, which is technically not part of the U.S. government. I didn't hear about the guy that killed 11 people yet. I'm not hip to that yet. I'll speak on it when I get some information, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's a frame-up job. Not surprised at all. So the Russians, they brought a lot of attention to the clique. It was going fine when it was Turks and Greeks, and the whole scam was good. They were quiet, but the Russians came in and they were all about the bling bling. They got the Maseratis and the Mercedes, and they're walking around Atlantic City gambling stacks of $100 bills. And so that kind of brings a little of attention. And the IRS realized that they were getting fucked out of hundreds of millions of dollars of tax money. And you don't want to cross those gangsters. What the Russians had discovered was a way to expand the scam into the biggest tax heist in the U.S. history. Prior to 1982, thousands of individual gas stations in New York State were responsible for collecting state and federal taxes, amounting to as much as 28 cents a gallon, and then passing them on to the relevant authorities. Because of rampant cheating, however, state lawmakers decided that year, excuse me. Sorry, getting lost here. Because of rampant cheating, however, state lawmakers decided that year to shift the responsibility to New York's 400 gasoline distributors who had to assess the fuel before it was moved to the stations. But clever Russians like Beluga found, in fact, that the new tax law presented opportunities for even larger scores. They would first set up a welter of phony distributors. Now, what's a welter? I've never heard that word, so I have to look it up. Weltor. A confused mass, a large number in no particular order. So, let's read that again. So Beluga found that there was even more money to be made because of this tax on gas. They would first set up a welter of phony paper at least, so a whole bunch of different things. Move it to another distributor through a so-called daisy chain. The transactions were carried out quickly and generated a blizzard of paper. One of the dummy enterprises was designated as the burn company, the one that was required to pay the taxes to the IRS. Instead, the burn company sold the gas at cut rate prices to independent retailers with a phony invoice stamped all taxes paid. The bootleggers pocketed the money, and the burn company, no more than a post office box at a corporate principal, usually a Russian emigre living in a rooming house on Brighton Beach Avenue, disappeared. So they set up this phony burn company, and this company paid all the taxes, but they sold the gas at cut rate prices, took the loss, it didn't matter, and they marked the sale as all taxes paid, and this way they avoided all the taxes. There's 1,000,001 schemes. By the time the IRS came looking for the taxes due, the revenue agents were buried under an intricate paper trail that led nowhere. So they had one company going to another, and it was just a confused mess, or a welter of companies. Yeah, Blitz, I'm hearing about the shooting. I don't know. I don't watch the news. I haven't had cable for 8 years, and I've never known so much in all my life because I stopped watching that shit. Pittsburgh synagogue, anti-Semitic. I'm not surprised. So now, not only do you have a supposedly white Republican sending bombs through the mail when he was really a Native American. He's not white at all. He's a Native American, and it's right before the elections, right? But now you have another white guy, probably, I'm guessing, who's anti-Semitic and going and shooting up a synagogue. None of this smells right. And my instincts tell me that this is a lot of fucking bullshit. I don't know. Could be real. I don't know. But if it is real, get it, is real. If it is real, could you blame people for having had enough of Jewish domination and Jewish oppression and Jewish propaganda and Jewish control? Could you blame them? Now, I never ever advise people to be violent. That is not the answer. At least not yet. We don't know how far we're going to be pushed. But as for right now, violence is not the answer. So I don't recommend it. But could you blame somebody for snapping in today's society? Could you blame them, really? So, Beluga proved a master at this scheme of beating the taxes and making money on it. And he, along with many other Russian groups, began amassing enormous sums from it. Through their control of gasoline distributorships in the New York metropolitan area and elsewhere, the Russian mobsters evaded as much as $8 billion a year in state and federal taxes by 1985. $8 billion a year. 8,000 million. If you had a briefcase with $1 million in it, 8,000 briefcases, all with $1 million in. That's 8 billion. Beluga's fraudulent fuel syndicate received a major boost from the involvement of Power Test, a mid-size $160 million a year gasoline company on Long Island that was itself being driven into bankruptcy by independent stations selling cheap or bootleg gas. Indeed, by 1980, half of all businessmen who couldn't afford to compete against cut-rate prices. Wow. Rather than see his company fail, Power Test CEO Leo Leibowitz decided to join the bootleggers. Leo Leibowitz decided to join the bootleggers. According to court testimony and interviews, he instructed two Power Test executives, John Byrne, a district sales manager and former New York City police sergeant, and Robert Eisenberg, the company's in-house counsel, to buy bootleg gas. Byrne and Eisenberg then set up bootlegging companies with Beluga that would sell cheap gas exclusively to Power Test. The plan worked. So successfully, in fact, that Power Test soon had enough cash to begin negotiating with Texaco to purchase Getty Oil, one of the fabled Seven Sisters. If you don't know, the Seven Sisters are what came out of Standard Oil, Rockefeller's Standard Oil, when it was broken up as a trust and split into seven, the Seven Sisters. That whole trust busting era in the early 1900s, it's a fucking scam. And Rockefeller made way more money after his trust was busted than he did before. Okay. So these guys, by the time they did this scam for long enough, they had enough money to buy, negotiating with Texaco to buy Getty Oil, one of the fabled Seven Sisters. Because of antitrust problems, Texaco was being forced to sell the East Coast marketing operation of Getty, which it had merely to save his company. Boy, I can't read tonight. Let me start that over. And this is in parentheses after the fabled Seven Sisters. Because of antitrust problems, Texaco was being forced to sell the East Coast marketing operation of Getty, which it had acquired in 1984. According to a Power Test insider, Leibowitz had joined the bootleggers not merely to save his company, but also because of his aspirations to become a major player in the oil business. Quote, Leo started talking to Texaco in the winter of 1983, unquote, recalls the insider. Continuing to quote, if he was going into receivership, he couldn't talk to Texaco. He had to keep the company solvent. So he did deals with gasoline bootleggers. He did lots of those deals. End of quote. In 1985, Power Test concluded the deal for Getty, and Leibowitz, triumphant atop the $1.3 billion company that adopted the lustrous Getty name, was lauded in Forbes as one of the most brilliant businessmen in America. The sky's the limit, Leibowitz told Newsday. We are the largest independent in the United States, and we are just getting started. 6 years later, Getty became the first major oil corporation in recent history to be convicted of gasoline bootlegging. John Byrne and Robert Eisenberg escaped prosecution by becoming government witnesses. 2 senior company executives were convicted and sentenced to jail terms, and Getty was fined $400,000. $400,000. Leibowitz, to the surprise of many, was never indicted. Getty's role in the scheme was uncovered by the Long Island Motor Fuel Task Force, a group of federal, state, and local prosecutors and investigators formed to combat gasoline bootlegging. And let me guess, they were all bought off too, right? Let me check the text. Let me check the chat, rather. The Getty kid was kidnapped. I'll have to look into that. Maybe it'll be talked about here. Thanks, Marge. Gasoline excise tax evasion is no longer a local problem, it's a national problem, said James Rodeo, a tax attorney with the U.S. Justice Department and a member of the tax force. Cheating of this magnitude has to stop. U.S. District Attorney or U.S. District Court Judge Leonard Wexler chided during sentencing. They all got to talk a big game, you know. By this time, however, the money from bootlegging had spread far beyond the gasoline industry. It was being used, New York and federal officials feared, to corrupt politicians, labor unions, and law enforcement itself. You see this all the time. You guys, the banking industry is supposed to be regulated by the SEC, the Securities and Exchange Commission, but they're all paid off, right? When you buy something on Wall Street, when you buy an instrument like a derivative or something, or a bond, these are all rated AAA or AA or substandard by Moody's and S&P, Standard & Poor's, right? Who are Moody's and Standard & Poor's? They work for the banks. It's all a rigged game, people. Everything is rigged in America. When George Carlin said America is all about bullshit and we thrive on red, white, and blue bullshit, it's not a lie. When we look at the FDA, my friend is in the business of kratom. The FDA is trying to ban kratom. Who does the FDA work for? The pharmaceutical industry in part, and Monsanto, and these criminals, the EPA. Who do they work for? The chemical companies, right? All these people who are supposed to be on your side, law enforcement, attorneys, they're all crooked. They're all on the take, people. And this is just another example, one of which I wasn't aware, but it's just another example of the criminality and the corruption that goes on in this country. And it's not unique to this country. So This is the way the world works, people. If you're naive and idealistic, I am here to black pill you, red pill you, pink pill you, whatever it takes. Let's learn together. That should be my motto. Okay, so it spread far beyond the gasoline industry, this money. It spread to New York, and federal officials feared. They knew. They didn't fear. They knew. To corrupt politicians and labor unions. So politicians, whether you're on the left or the right, doesn't matter. If you think it's the difference between left and right, don't even fucking go there. On the surface, when the cameras are on, they say, yeah, we disagree, left and right. But when it comes to these questions, when it comes to war overseas, they all agree. They're in lockstep. Labor unions are supposed to be a Democrat thing, right? If you've ever been in a labor union, they tell you vote Democrat, vote Democrat. They're taking money from both sides. When you hear them talk about close the border, that's supposed to be a Republican talking point. But if you went back in time, you'll see that Democrats talked about closing the border. Did they ever do anything? No. The Republicans talk about closing the border. Do they ever do anything? No, because this influx of Mexicans brings down wages all across the board, and the corporations that employ people love it. And who fucking funds the Democrats and the Republicans? Corporations and banks. And they love people pouring into our country because it brings down wages. Sorry about the rant. I just had to. Couldn't help it. So, all this gas money is corrupting politicians, labor unions, and law enforcement itself. Consider the revelations of Lawrence Iorizzo, a 6-foot, 450-pound, self-confessed bigamist. I think that's multiple wives. Who became a government informant after he was indicted for stealing $1.1 million in gas taxes in 1984. A New York gasoline company executive who is credited with inventing the daisy chain, Iorizzo ran an enormously successful bootlegging empire in the early to mid 1980s with the help of Michael Franzese, the vicious yuppie Don of the Colombo crime family, and a consortium of Russian and Eastern European gangsters. So everybody knows about the Italian gangsters. We hear it all over anything that comes out of Hollywood, right? But there's somebody above the Italian gangsters. It is the Russian, or that's right, Jewish gangsters. If the Jews run Hollywood, if it's predominantly Jewish run, do you expect them to be doing movies about Russian or Jewish mobsters? Or do you expect them to pin that fucking thing on someone else? The Italian mobsters. So when you think mafia, when you think mobsters, what do you first think? Capone and the Sopranos and the Godfather and the this and the that. It's always the fucking greaseball Italians, but they are not telling you about the bigger, more widespread mobsters. Guys, I'm going to keep it on for another 8 minutes because Handsome Truth's going on soon. But when you hear about the Italian mafia, think about the Jewish mafia that runs them. You look back in time, you look at the Jewish mobsters like Modalitz, like Meyer Lansky, at Rothstein. You look at Bugsy Siegel. You look at all these big Jewish gangsters, and they were more prominent than Lucky Luciano and Al Capone. All right, so there's a hierarchy, but Hollywood will only tell you about the Italians because they want you to fucking believe that the extent of the mafia is just Italians. It's not. All right, so we're going to go a couple more paragraphs and we're done. The vicious yuppie Don of the Colombo crime family and a consortium of Russian and Eastern European gangsters. In sworn testimony before the Oversight Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee, Iorizzo charged that one of his former partners, Martin Carey, had skimmed millions of dollars of tax money from his Long Island gas stations and illegally channeled it into the campaign treasury of his older brother, Hugh, then the governor of New York, Hugh Carey. Now, I've never heard of him, but this is something you can go check on your own. They're claiming that Hugh Carey was the governor of New York and that his brother was connected with the mafia and running money into his campaign. Slick. So in sworn testimony before the Oversight Subcommittee of the House Ways and Means Committee, Iorizzo charged that one of his former partners, Martin Carey, had skimmed millions of dollars of tax money from his Long Island gas stations, or as they say in Long Island, Long Island, and channeled it into the campaign treasury of his older brother Hugh, then the governor of New York. Martin Carey escaped prosecution because he had been granted immunity by testifying in another case. Nice to have connections. Incredibly, Iorizzo's charges of political corruption were never investigated. That's peculiar. In 1987, when Jeremiah McKenna, the counsel to New York's Crime and Correction Committee, called for a hearing to probe Iorizzo's allegations, he was forced to resign by New York Governor Mario Cuomo, who had been Carey's running mate as lieutenant governor in 1978. You see, it's all one big familia. Cuomo complained that McKenna, a respected Republican investigator, was spreading false and malicious stories. Iorizzo had previously testified to Congress that he had made political contributions to Governor Cuomo's 1984 campaign from some of those bootlegging funds, asserting that he had done so at the discretions of people above him. And so my mind is starting to be a little clouded with all these names coming at me at once, right? I guess you guys are too. You know, they're saying this guy's the governor and this guy's the gangster, Iorizzo and Cuomo and Carey. And so it's like one big bombardment of names coming at you at once. But hang in there, because this shit will come back, and I stop once in a while to describe things. So we'll do one more paragraph, and then you guys, it's handsome truth time. Though Iorizzo's allegations about political corruption were ignored by prosecutors, his court testimony did help to break up the powerful Russian-Italian bootlegging combine led by Francesi, which paved the way for Balugala to gain uncontested control of the operation. By 1985, Balugala, who's the main guy we need to worry about here, was well on his way to becoming the undisputed king of American bootleggers. His domain was a self-contained, vertically integrated behemoth giant that included ocean-going tankers, 7 terminals, a fleet of stations, all operated by fiercely loyal Soviet Jewish immigrants. Balugala even negotiated to take over oil refining terminals in Eastern Bloc countries. What's an Eastern Bloc country? Former Soviet Union. Excuse me. Which would process fuel waste products known as derivatives, then sell shiploads of the toxic byproducts in North America. Balugala's headquarters in New Rochelle, New York, which ironically stood next to an FBI building, that is ironic, looked like a scene in a Stanley Kubrick black comedy. Stanley Kubrick, lot of people say he helped to fake the moon landings. I don't know about that. I don't know. I'm not going there right now. Russian secretaries wearing identical zebra print dresses and fur hats worked at computer terminals while video cameras scanned the office. The obsession with security, says one of Belugalo's associates, came from the paranoid Russian personality that one develops growing up in a police state. And they're right to be paranoid. They are right. Remember, if they are really out to get you, then you're not paranoid. So let's end it there. Guys, I'm going fishing after this. Wish me good luck. I want to show you guys, before you go to HT, that's fine. I want to show you guys what I use for bait and where I got my name, Tui-O Shmeal. All right, you ready? I fish for striped bass, and that's what I use for bait. Live eels. Look at that. Oh, yeah. That's live and direct, baby. When the fish sees that, he's going to fucking slaughter that motherfucker. Woo! There you go. Now you know why I'm Tui-O Shmeal. I live up to my name. I'm going fishing tonight. I'm going to be out there all fucking night in the dark by myself on this rainy, shitty night, and I'm going to catch fish. And when I do, I'm going to show you my fish. All right? I'll see you guys tomorrow, maybe. Big bait, big fish. You got it, existence. You know how it goes. I know, Marge. I feel bad for them, but you know what? They're bait for everything out there. And cheers. Wish me good luck. You catch big fish, Marge, when all the rookies and all the little weekend warriors are at home, snuggled up nice and warm with their honeys, and I'm out there in the cold and the rain fishing. That's when you catch. All right, guys. Thanks. Thanks for checking me out. I'll check you later. Peace.